My name is Valdi Rainey. I am 67 years old, and for 42 years of marriage, I thought I knew my husband Oswaldo perfectly, until an apparently casual encounter at the municipal market in Uberlandia completely changed my life. I was buying spices for Sunday lunch when a younger, elegant woman approached me with tears in her eyes and said she needed to tell me something about the man I called my husband. Graceline, that was her name, revealed to me that for 15 years she had been maintaining a relationship with Oswaldo, and that he had promised to separate from me to stay with her, but never kept his word. The impact was devastating. I felt as if the ground had disappeared under my feet. But even worse was discovering that our daughter, Marilyn, 35 years old, knew everything and was covering for her father. For 3 months I lived in silent agony, pretending normalcy while my soul was slowly falling apart, until I discovered that Oswaldo had used our joint savings to buy a house for Graceline in the Tiberi neighborhood. The pain transformed into revolt when I realized he planned to abandon me as soon as he retired, leaving me with nothing after a lifetime of dedication. That's when I began to architect my revenge, taking advantage of the fact that Oswaldo always underestimated me, considering me just a housewife without malice. I discovered that he had registered the house in Graceline's name to hide the property from me, but he didn't know that I had kept all the bank transfer receipts. In the following months, I pretended to accept the situation with resignation, which made Oswaldo completely relax his guard, while I secretly consulted a lawyer and gathered evidence of all his hidden assets. The first twist came when I discovered that Graceline was also being deceived, as Oswaldo was still maintaining a third woman, Nelma, in Patos de Minas. The second twist happened when Marilyn finally came to me, crying, revealing that her father had tried to seduce her best friend, Viviane, during a family party. The third twist was discovering that Oswaldo had forged my signature to get a loan using our house as collateral, planning to flee with all the money. The fourth twist occurred when Graceline approached me again, this time to propose an alliance against Oswaldo, as she had also discovered about Nelma, and was furious. The fifth and biggest twist came when I discovered that Oswaldo had planned to have me committed to a psychiatric clinic, claiming I had mental problems, to keep all the assets. For 8 months I carefully elaborated each step of my revenge, taking advantage of Oswaldo's excessive confidence and the Minas Gerais tradition of resolving conflicts through conversation and cunning, not violence. I used my knowledge about local culture, especially the custom of women gathering to embroider and talk, to discreetly spread information about Oswaldo's conduct in the community. I organized irrefutable evidence of all the betrayals, forgeries, and thefts, always maintaining my facade of submissive and naive wife until the perfect moment to act arrived. The suffering was immense during this period: sleepless nights, anxiety attacks, the constant feeling of living a lie. But I knew I needed to be strong to achieve justice. When I finally executed my revenge, on the eve of our 43rd wedding anniversary, Oswaldo discovered he had lost everything: the house, the savings, his reputation in the city, and would still face criminal proceedings for document forgery. Grace and Nelma also turned against him, forming a united front of betrayed women who would not allow him to escape the consequences. Marilyn, ashamed of her father's actions, stayed by my side, and together we began a new life, stronger and more united than ever. What began as a casual encounter, programmed by destiny at the municipal market, became the catalyst for my liberation from 4 decades of manipulation and disrespect, proving that even at 67 years old, a woman can start over and find her true inner strength. Chapter 1. The morning air in Uberlandia carried the familiar scent of fresh bread from the nearby bakery as I walked through the municipal market, my canvas bag swinging gently at my side. At 67, I had developed a routine that rarely varied. Sunday mornings were for buying ingredients for our traditional family lunch, the same meal I had prepared for Oswaldo and our daughter Marilyn for over 4 decades. My fingers traced the rough texture of the tomatoes, selecting the ripest ones for the sauce. The vendors knew me by name, always greeting me with warm smiles and asking about my family. "Donna Valdirene, how's everything at home?" asked Joe, the spice vendor, his weathered hands arranging small mountains of cumin and paprika. "Everything's fine, Joe," I replied automatically, though something felt different that morning. There was a heaviness in my chest that I couldn't quite explain, a sensation that had been growing stronger over the past few weeks. Oswaldo had been distant lately, more so than usual, spending long hours at the office even though his retirement was only months away. As I reached for a bundle of fresh cilantro, a woman's voice behind me caught my attention. "Excuse me, are you Valdirene?" The voice was soft, trembling slightly. I turned to see a woman in her early 50s, elegantly dressed in a navy blue dress that looked expensive. Her dark hair was styled perfectly, and her makeup was impeccable, despite the tears that threatened to spill from her brown eyes. "Yes, I am," I replied, confusion clouding my thoughts. I had never seen this woman before, yet something about her seemed familiar, as if I had glimpsed her in a dream. "My name is Graceline," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I need to speak with you about your husband." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. The sounds of the market, vendors calling out prices, customers haggling, children laughing, all faded into a distant hum. My hands gripped the cilantro so tightly that the stems began to bruise. "I don't understand," I managed to say, though deep down, some part of me did understand. It was the same part that had noticed Oswaldo's new cologne, the way he smiled at his phone when he thought I wasn't looking, the unexplained absences that had become more frequent. Graceline looked around nervously, then stepped closer. "Please, can we talk somewhere private? What I have to tell you, it's important." My legs felt weak, but I nodded. We walked to a small cafe at the edge of the market, where the elderly owner, Donna Rosa, served us steaming cups of coffee without asking. The bitter liquid burned my tongue, but I welcomed the sensation. It was real, grounding me in a moment that felt increasingly surreal. "I've been seeing your husband for 15 years, Graceline said, her words falling like stones into still water. "He promised me he would leave you. He said he was waiting for the right moment, that he didn't want to hurt you." 15 years. The number echoed in my mind like a cruel joke. 15 years of holidays, anniversaries, family gatherings where Oswaldo had kissed my cheek and told me he loved me. 15 years of lies so carefully constructed that I had never suspected. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. Graceline's composure cracked, and tears began to flow freely, because I found out about another woman, Nelma. She lives in Patos de Minas. He's been seeing her too, for God knows how long. I realized he's never going to leave you, that he's been playing all of us. The coffee cup slipped from my hands, crashing to the floor and sending ceramic shards across the tile. Donna Rosa rushed over with a towel, clucking her tongue sympathetically, but I barely noticed. My mind was reeling, trying to process this information that seemed to belong to someone else's life. "I have pictures," Graceline continued, pulling out her phone. "Text messages. I thought you deserved to know the truth." I stared at the screen as she scrolled through images that shattered my world. There was Oswaldo, my husband of 42 years, kissing this woman in front of a house I didn't recognize. Another photo showed him with his arm around a different woman, Nelma. I assumed at what looked like a restaurant in another city. "Where is this house?" I asked, pointing to the first photo. "Tybury neighborhood. He bought it for me 2 years ago, said it was an investment, that we would live there together someday." The betrayal cut deeper than I had thought possible. Not only had Oswaldo been unfaithful, but he had used our money. I had helped save through years of careful budgeting and sacrifice to buy a house for his mistress. "Does anyone else know?" I whispered. Graceline hesitated. Then, nodded reluctantly. Your daughter knows Marilyn. She's known for years. The world went dark around the edges. Marilyn, my precious daughter, the one person I thought I could trust completely, had been complicit in this deception. She had sat at our dinner table, accepting my cooking and my love, while knowing that her father was destroying our family. I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping against the floor. I need to go. Wait, Graceline called out. What are you going to do? I turned back to look at her, this woman who had unknowingly shared my husband for 15 years. I don't know, I said honestly. I need to think. The walk home felt endless. Every step seemed to take me further from the life I had known and closer to something dark and uncertain. The house that had been my sanctuary for decades now felt like a prison. Its familiar walls hiding secrets I was only beginning to understand. Oswaldo's car was in the driveway when I arrived. I found him in the living room, watching television and drinking beer, looking relaxed and content. He glanced up when I entered, giving me the same smile he had given me that morning when he kissed my forehead and told me to have a good day at the market. How was your shopping, dear? He asked, not really waiting for an answer before turning back to the television. I stood there for a moment, studying this man I had loved for so long. How many times had he lied to my face? How many times had he come home to me after being with another woman? The questions burned in my throat, but I swallowed them down. It was fine, I said, just as I had said thousands of times before. But as I walked to the kitchen to prepare lunch, I knew that nothing would ever be fine again. The woman who had left for the market that morning was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. Someone who was beginning to understand that the life she had built was nothing more than an elaborate illusion. As I began peeling potatoes for the Sunday meal, my hands moved automatically while my mind raced. 15 years of deception, a house bought with our money, my daughter's betrayal. The knowledge sat in my stomach like a stone, growing heavier with each passing moment. What other secrets was my husband hiding? And more importantly, what was I going to do about it? Chapter 2. The next 3 months passed in a haze of agonizing pretense. Each morning I woke up next to Oswaldo, his familiar breathing a sound that now filled me with revulsion instead of comfort. I would lie there in the pre-dawn darkness, staring at the ceiling and wondering how many mornings he had planned to leave me. How many times he had looked at me sleeping and felt nothing but contempt. The hardest part was maintaining the facade. I still prepared his favorite meals, still washed his clothes, still smiled when he kissed my cheek goodbye each morning. But every gesture felt like swallowing glass, each act of devotion a betrayal of my own dignity. I had become a detective in my own home, noticing things that had been invisible before. The way he showered immediately when he came home from work. The new clothes that appeared in his closet, items more expensive than what we could afford, on his salary. The phone calls he took in the garage, his voice dropping to a whisper when he thought I was out of earshot. 3 weeks after my encounter with Graceline, I made a discovery that nearly broke me completely. I was looking for our bank statements to balance our monthly expenses, a task I had always handled, when I found them hidden in Oswaldo's dresser drawer. The numbers didn't make sense at first. Large withdrawals I didn't remember making, transfers to accounts I didn't recognize. As the first pieced together the financial puzzle, the scope of his deception became clear. Over the past 2 years, he had systematically drained our joint savings account, the money we had planned to use for our retirement. Nearly 40,000 reais had vanished, transferred in small amounts to avoid detection. I sat on our bed, surrounded by bank statements and receipts, feeling as though I was drowning in my own life. The house around me, our home, suddenly felt like a museum of lies. Every piece of furniture, every photograph, every shared memory was tainted by the knowledge of what he had done. That evening, as we sat down for dinner, I watched Oswaldo eat the meal I had prepared. He complimented the seasoning on the beans, asked about my day, told me about a problem at work. All perfectly normal, all perfectly false. Oswaldo, I said. Carefully, I was looking at our bank statements today. There seemed to be some discrepancies. He looked up from his plate, his expression unchanged. What kind of discrepancies? Large withdrawals. I don't remember making them. Oh, those, he said, returning to his food. Work expenses. I've been advancing money for some projects. It will all be reimbursed. The lie came so easily, so naturally, that I wondered how many others I had believed over the years. How many times had he looked me in the eye and lied, knowing I trusted him completely? When will the reimbursement come? I asked. Soon, he said, then changed the subject to something about Marilene's job. That night, I called my daughter for the first time since learning about her betrayal. Her voice was bright and cheerful, full of the warmth that had always characterized our relationship. Mammy, how are you? I was thinking of coming by this weekend, Marilene, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I need to ask you something. There was a pause. Of course. What is it? Do you know anything about your father's activities? Outside of work? The silence stretched between us like a chasm. When she finally spoke, her voice was small and defensive. I don't know what you mean. I think you do. Another pause, longer this time. Mammy, some things are better left alone. Papai loves you. He's always loved you, but he loves other people too, doesn't he? I heard her intake of breath, sharp and guilty. I don't want to be in the middle of this. You're already in the middle of it, I said quietly. You have been for years. She hung up without another word, leaving me alone with the dial tone and the crushing weight of my isolation. Not only had I lost my husband, but I had lost my daughter as well. The two people I loved most in the world had conspired to keep me living in a lie. Over the following weeks, I began to change. The transformation was subtle at first, a hardening around my eyes, a new set to my jaw. I stopped humming while I cooked, stopped smiling at Oswaldo's jokes. When he asked if something was wrong, I would say I was tired, that I wasn't feeling well. But internally, I was becoming someone else entirely. The pain of betrayal was slowly being replaced by something colder, more calculating. I found myself studying Oswaldo when he wasn't looking, cataloging his habits, his weaknesses, his vulnerabilities. The man who had once been my beloved husband was becoming my opponent. I began to gather evidence methodically. I made copies of bank statements, photographed receipts, recorded phone calls when possible. I opened my own bank account, one that Oswaldo knew nothing about, and began transferring small amounts of money that was rightfully mine. The most painful discovery came in early April. I was cleaning our bedroom when I found a key hidden behind a loose baseboard. It was small, the kind used for safety deposit boxes. The next day, while Oswaldo was at work, I went to every bank in the city until I found the right one. Inside the safety deposit box were documents that revealed the full extent of his deception. The deed to the house in Tybury, registered in Grassline's name, but paid for with our money. Insurance policies I had never seen before, and most damaging of all, a forged copy of my signature on a loan application, using our family home as collateral. He had mortgaged our house without my knowledge, taking out a loan for 50,000 reais. The money had been used to buy property for his mistresses, to fund his double life, to prepare for the day when he would abandon me entirely. As I sat in the bank's sterile viewing room, surrounded by the evidence of my husband's betrayal, I felt something inside me break. Not my heart, that had been broken months ago. Something deeper, more fundamental. The part of me that had believed in goodness, and the possibility of redemption, and the idea that people could change. I put the documents back in the box and walked out into the bright afternoon sunshine. The world looked different now, sharper somehow, as if I had been looking at it through a fog that had finally lifted. That evening, I cooked Oswaldo's favorite meal, feijoada, with all the traditional accompaniments. I set the table carefully, lit candles, even opened a bottle of wine. When he came home, he was surprised and pleased. "What's the occasion?" he asked, kissing my cheek. "No occasion," I said, serving him a generous portion. "I just wanted to do something special for you." He smiled, the same smile that had once made my heart race. "You're the best wife a man could ask for, Valderrani." I smiled back, raising my wine glass in a toast. "To us," I said. "To us," he agreed. But as we clinked glasses, I was already planning his destruction. The woman who had been content to be deceived was gone. In her place was someone harder, smarter, more dangerous than Oswaldo could ever imagine. Chapter 3: The Transformation. Within me accelerated as spring turned to summer. By May, I had become someone I barely recognized, a woman who could lie as easily as breathing, who could smile at her husband while planning his downfall. The innocent housewife who had trusted blindly was gone, replaced by someone who questioned everything and prepared for war. My first strategic move was to reach out to Graceline. I found her contact information in Oswaldo's hidden phone records, and called her on a Tuesday afternoon when I knew he would be at work. "Graceline, this is Valderrani. We need to talk." She was hesitant at first, probably fearing that I would blame her for the affair, but when I explained what I had discovered about the loan fraud and his other deceptions, her tone changed completely. "He told me he had divorced you," she said, her voice shaking with anger. "He said the house was bought with his inheritance from his father. I never knew about the loan. We met at a small restaurant on the outskirts of the city, away from prying eyes. Graceline was different from how I remembered her, harder, more bitter. The elegant woman from the market had been replaced by someone who looked as betrayed as I felt. I gave him 15 years of my life," she said, stirring her coffee absently. "I turned down other men, other opportunities. I believed his lies about leaving you, about building a future together." "What do you know about Nelma?" I asked. "More than I wish I did." "She's a teacher in Patos de Minas." Oswaldo told her the same lies he told me, that he was divorced, that he was free to love her. "She's been with him for 8 years. 8 years. The number hit me like a physical blow, while I had been caring for Oswaldo through his bout with pneumonia, celebrating our 35th wedding anniversary, supporting him through his mother's passing. He had been building a relationship with a third woman. "I want to destroy him," I said, quietly. Graceline looked up from her coffee, meeting my eyes for the first time. "What do you mean?" "I mean I want him to lose everything, the house, the money, his reputation. I want him to feel what we've felt." She was quiet for a long moment. "What do you need from me?" "Evidence, documentation, proof of what he promised you, what he gave you. And I need you to contact Nelma. You want to bring her into this too. I want all of us to work together. He's played us against each other for years. Now it's time to turn the tables." That conversation marked the beginning of what I came to think of as my campaign. Over the next month, I methodically gathered allies and evidence. Graceline provided text messages and emails from Oswaldo, along with documentation of the house purchase. Together, we contacted Nelma, who was initially suspicious, but became a valuable ally once she understood the scope of Oswaldo's deception. Nelma was perhaps the most naive of all of us. She had genuinely believed that Oswaldo was a widower, that his frequent trips to Uberlandia were for work. She had been planning to move to our city after his retirement, expecting to live openly with him as his wife. "He showed me pictures of a house," she told me during our first phone conversation. "He said it was ours, that he had bought it for our future together." "The same house he bought for Graceline," I said. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening, but my most painful discovery came from an unexpected source. In late June, Marilyn finally visited, arriving at our house with red eyes and a guilty expression. She had been avoiding me since our last conversation, but something had finally driven her to seek me out. "Mammy," she said, sitting heavily at our kitchen table. "I need to tell you something." I poured her a glass of water and sat across from her, waiting. "It's about Popeye," she began, then stopped, covering her face with her hands. "God, I don't know how to say this." "Just say it," I said gently, though my heart was pounding. He made advances toward Vivienne at my birthday party last month. She told me about it yesterday. Vivienne was Marilene's best friend, a sweet girl in her early 30s, who had been like a daughter to me. The thought of Oswaldo pursuing her made my stomach turn. "What kind of advances?" I asked. He cornered her in the kitchen, told her she was beautiful, that she deserved better than the boys her age. He touched her, Mammy, inappropriately. I felt as though I was falling through the floor. This wasn't just about adultery anymore. This was about a man who had no boundaries, no respect for anyone, including his own family. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" I asked. I was scared, ashamed. I thought if I ignored it, it would stop. But Vivienne is traumatized. She's been having nightmares. "And you've known about his affairs for years." Marilene nodded miserably. "He said he would leave if I told you. He said it would destroy the family. I thought, I thought I was protecting you." "You were protecting him," I said quietly, "not me." She broke down then, sobbing into her hands. "I'm so sorry, Mammy. I've been such a coward." I reached across the table and took her hand. Despite everything, she was still my daughter. "It's not too late to do the right thing," I said. "What do you mean?" "I mean it's time to stop protecting him. It's time to stand up for what's right." That night, after Mariline had gone home, I sat in my bedroom and took stock of what I had learned. Oswaldo wasn't just an adulterer. He was a predator, a man who would betray anyone and everyone to satisfy his own desires. The lone fraud was just the beginning. If I didn't stop him, he would continue to hurt people. I opened my laptop and began typing, documenting everything I had discovered. The affairs, the financial fraud, the harassment of Vivienne. I created a timeline, cross-referencing bank records with phone records, building a case that would be impossible to deny. As I worked, I felt a strange sense of calm settling over me. For months, I had been consumed by rage and pain, but now, I had a purpose, a mission that went beyond personal revenge. I was going to save other women from falling victim to Oswaldo's lies. The next morning, I called a lawyer, not the family attorney who had handled our wills and property documents, but a sharp young woman who specialized in divorce and fraud cases. Her name was Dr. Carla Santos, and she came highly recommended by a friend whose daughter had gone through a difficult divorce. "Mrs. Valdirani," Dr. Santos said, "after reviewing my evidence, you have a very strong case, but I need to ask you something. What do you want to achieve here?" "I want everything," I said. "The house, the savings, his pension, and I want him to face consequences for what he's done. This will be a long process. Are you prepared for that?" "I've been preparing for 42 years, I said. "I'm ready." As I left her office, I felt lighter than I had in months. The wheels were in motion. Soon, Oswaldo would discover that the woman he had underestimated for so long was about to become his worst nightmare. But first, I had one more surprise for him. That evening, I prepared his favorite dessert, pudim de leite, and served it with a special announcement. "Oswaldo," I said, watching him savor the sweet custard, "I've been thinking about our retirement plans." He looked up, interested. "Oh, what about them?" "Well, I know you've been working so hard, making so many sacrifices for our future. I want to make sure we're both prepared for this next chapter of our lives." "That's very thoughtful of you, dear. I've been doing some research into our finances, making sure everything is in order. I want to surprise you with how organized I've become." He smiled indulgently. "You've always been organized, Valdirani. Not like this," I said, returning his smile. You're going to be amazed at what I've learned." As he finished his dessert, completely unaware that I was about to turn his world upside down, I savored my own small victory. Tomorrow, I would begin the final phase of my plan. Tonight, I would simply enjoy watching him eat what would be his last peaceful meal in our home. Chapter the 4th of August arrived with the oppressive heat typical of the Brazilian interior, but I barely noticed the weather. My days were consumed with preparation, each detail of my plan carefully orchestrated. I had become a master of deception, learned from the best teacher possible, my own husband. The most shocking revelation came in early August, when I discovered documents hidden in Oswaldo's home office that revealed the true scope of his betrayal. While searching through his desk drawers one afternoon, I found a manila envelope tucked behind a false back panel. Inside were commitment papers for a private psychiatric clinic in Belo Horizonte with my name as the patient. My hands trembled as I read the documents. Oswaldo had been laying the groundwork to have me declared mentally incompetent, claiming that I suffered from severe depression and paranoid delusions. The papers were signed by Dr. Enrique Moret, a psychiatrist I had never met, and dated just 3 weeks earlier. The plan was diabolical in its simplicity. Once I was institutionalized, Oswaldo would have complete control over our assets. He could sell the house, access my pension, and disappear with his mistresses, leaving me trapped in a mental facility with no way to prove my sanity. I photographed every document, my heart pounding with a mixture of terror and rage. This wasn't just about adultery or financial fraud anymore. This was about a man who was willing to destroy my mind, my freedom, my very identity, to get what he wanted. That evening, I called Dr. Santos from my bedroom while Oswaldo watched television downstairs. "Dr. Santos, I need to see you urgently. I've discovered something that changes everything." The next morning, I sat in her office, watching her face grow pale as she reviewed the commitment papers. "This is criminal," she said finally. "He's attempting to have you falsely committed. The psychiatrist who signed these papers could lose his license. What do? We accelerate our timeline. I was planning to file for divorce next month, but we need to act immediately. If he tries to have you committed, we'll have him arrested for fraud and conspiracy. How long do we have? Based on these documents, he's planning to act within the next 2 weeks. We need to move now." I left her office feeling both terrified and exhilarated. The final battle was about to begin, and I was as ready as I would ever be. That same afternoon, I had an unexpected visitor. Graceline arrived at my house, looking agitated and upset. "He's been calling me," she said, without preamble. "Oswaldo, he says he's finally ready to leave you, that he's found a way to get all the money he needs." "What did you tell him?" I played along. I told him I was excited, that I had been waiting for this moment. "But Valdirene, he's planning something terrible. He mentioned a clinic, said you were getting the help you need." So he had been discussing his plan with his mistresses, probably asking them to be patient while he solved his wife problem. The calculated cruelty of it took my breath away. "Did he say when? Next week?" "He wants to meet me at the house in Tiberi to celebrate. He says by then, everything will be settled." I felt a cold smile spread across my face. Perfect. Let him think he's won. Let him celebrate. It will make his fall that much sweeter. The next few days passed in a blur of preparation. I finalized my arrangements with Dr. Santos, ensured that all my evidence was properly documented, and made sure that Marilyn was prepared for what was coming. My daughter had become my strongest ally, her guilt over her years of silence transforming into fierce determination to make things right. She had convinced Viviane to give a statement about Oswaldo's harassment, and she had helped me document several other incidents of inappropriate behavior that I had dismissed at the time. "I should have protected you," she said during one of our late-night planning sessions. "I should have told you the truth years ago. You're protecting me now," I said. "That's what matters." On the Thursday before Oswaldo's planned meeting with Grasseline, I received a call that changed everything. It was Nelma, calling from Patos de Minas, Valdirene. I need to tell you something. Oswaldo was here yesterday. He brought papers for me to sign, said they were for our future together. But I looked at them more carefully after he left. They're not what he said they were. What kind of papers? A power of attorney. He wanted me to sign documents giving him control over a bank account. But the account isn't in my name, it's in yours. The room seemed to spin around me. What? He's been using my identity to open accounts in your name. He has fake documents, forged signatures. He's been stealing from you for years, not just the money you know about. I sank into a chair, overwhelmed by the magnitude of his deception. How much money? Based on the documents I saw. At least 200,000 reais, maybe more. 200,000 reais. Nearly our entire life savings, plus money I never knew existed. Money from my pension, from insurance settlements, from investments I had never made. Nelma, I need you to keep those documents safe. Don't. Let him know you've discovered what they really are. I won't. But Valdirene, there's something else. He's been talking about disappearing, going to another state, maybe even another country. He says he's tired of living a lie. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen for a long time, staring at the phone. The scope of Oswaldo's betrayal was beyond anything I had imagined. He hadn't just been unfaithful, he had been systematically destroying my life, stealing my identity, planning to erase me entirely. But he had made one crucial mistake. He had underestimated me. That evening, I prepared what would be our last dinner together. I cooked with extra care, wanting everything to be perfect. Oswaldo came home in an excellent mood, humming a tune I didn't recognize. You seem happy, I observed, as he sat down at the table. I am, he said, reaching for my hand. I've been thinking about our future, about all the adventures we'll have. When I retire, what kind of adventures? Maybe we'll travel, see the world. We have enough money saved to do whatever we want. I smiled, squeezing his hand. That sounds wonderful. You know, Valdirene, I don't tell you enough how much I love you. How grateful I am for everything you've done for our family. I love you too, I said, and for a moment, I almost meant it. This was the man I had fallen in love with 43 years ago, the man who had promised to cherish and protect me. But that man had died somewhere along the way, replaced by someone I no longer recognized. After dinner, we sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Oswaldo was relaxed, confident, probably thinking about his imminent escape with Grasseline. Tomorrow is Friday, he said. I might be late coming home. I have some business to take care of. Of course, I said. Take all the time you need. He kissed my forehead before going inside, and I remained on the porch long after dark, listening to the sounds of the night. Somewhere in the distance, a dog was barking. A car passed by, its headlights briefly illuminating the street. Tomorrow would be the anniversary of our first date, 43 years ago. Young Valdirene had been so excited, so full of hope for the future. She had believed in fairy tales, in happy endings, in the power of love to conquer all obstacles. That woman was gone now, replaced by someone harder, wiser, more ruthless. Someone who understood that sometimes justice required a firm hand, that sometimes the only way to stop a predator was to become one yourself. I stood up and walked inside, locking the door behind me. Tomorrow, Oswaldo would discover that the game he had been playing for years was finally over. And this time, he would be the one who lost everything. Chapter 5. Friday arrived, with a morning mist that covered Uberlandia like a veil, perfectly mirroring the uncertainty that hung over my life. Oswaldo had left early, claiming an important meeting at the office, but I knew he was actually preparing to meet Grasseline at the house in Tiberi. What he didn't know was that I had spent the previous night finalizing the last details of my own plan. Dr. Santos had called me at 7 in the morning, confirming that all documents were ready. "Valdirene, today is the day," she said, with a voice that mixed determination and compassion. "Are you sure you're prepared for this?" I looked in the bathroom mirror, seeing a woman I barely recognized. My eyes had a hardness that hadn't existed 6 months ago, and my jaw was set with a determination that came from months of careful planning. I've never been more ready for anything in my life. Remember, timing is everything. We need to execute this precisely, or he could slip away. After hanging up, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee, reviewing my mental checklist one final time. Marilyn would arrive at 10 to provide moral support and witness what was about to unfold. Graceline was positioned at the Tybri house, ready to play her part in the trap. Nelma had traveled from Patos de Minas and was waiting at a hotel downtown, with the forged documents that would seal Oswaldo's fate. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was using the same network of women he had deceived to bring about his downfall. We had spent months coordinating this moment, sharing information, building trust where once there had been only betrayal and competition. At exactly 9:30, my phone rang. It was Graceline, her voice tight with nervous energy. "He's here," she whispered. "He brought champagne and flowers. He's talking about our future together, about how free he feels now that he's solved his problems." "What problems?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "He says you're being transferred to a facility where you'll get proper care. He's convinced himself that he's doing this for your own good, that you'll be happier there." The casual cruelty of it still had the power to take my breath away. Even now, in what he thought was his moment of triumph, he was rewriting history to make himself the hero of the story. "Did he bring the documents?" "Yes. He wants me to sign some papers, says they're to transfer ownership of the house fully, to my name. But based on what you've taught me, I know there's something else entirely. Don't sign anything yet. Wait for my signal." At 10 o'clock sharp, Marilyn arrived, her face pale but determined. She had been fighting her own guilt for weeks, and today represented her chance at redemption. "Mammy, are you really going to do this?" she asked, sitting beside me at the kitchen table. "Your father made this choice years ago," I said. "I'm just making sure he faces the consequences. What if he tries to fight back? What if he gets violent? Your father is many things, but he's not violent. He's a coward who hides behind lies and manipulation. When cornered, men like him don't fight, they crumble." At 11, Dr. Santos arrived with 2 assistants and a briefcase full of legal documents. She was a small woman with steel-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. The kind of lawyer who had built her reputation on helping women escape from impossible situations. "Mrs. Valdirene," she said, setting her briefcase on my dining room table. "I need you to understand what's about to happen. Once we start this process, there's no going back. Your husband will be arrested, your marriage will be over, and your life will change completely." "My life has already changed," I said. "Today I'm just making it official." The first phase of the plan unfolded with military precision. Dr. Santos's assistants served papers at Oswaldo's workplace, freezing all joint accounts and assets. Simultaneously, documents were filed with the court system, formally charging him with fraud, forgery, and conspiracy. While this was happening, I called Graceline to give her the signal. "Now," I said simply. 20 minutes later, my phone rang again. This time it was Oswaldo, his voice high with panic and disbelief. "Valdirene, what the hell is going on? I just got a call from the bank saying our accounts have been frozen. There are lawyers at my office?" "Where are you, Oswaldo?" I asked calmly. I'm at a friend's house. What does that matter?" "You need to call these people and tell them there's been a mistake." "There's no mistake. I know everything. About Graceline, about Nelma, about the house, about the money you've stolen. About the clinic where you planned to have me committed. I know about all of it. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, smaller, more desperate. Valderrani, let me explain. You don't understand the situation. I was trying to protect you. From what? From the truth? From my own money? From my own life? You're not thinking clearly. You're confused, emotional. We can work this out. Actually, I'm thinking more clearly than I have in years. And we're not working anything out. It's over, Oswaldo. Everything is over. I hung up the phone and immediately called Grasslin. How did he react when you told him? I asked. He went white as a sheet. Started mumbling about how this wasn't possible, that you were too stupid to figure out something this complicated. Then he got angry, started blaming me for somehow betraying him. Did he try to leave? He did, but I followed your instructions. I told him the police were already on their way, that running would only make things worse. He's sitting in the living room now, staring at the wall. Good. Keep him there. Don't let him out of your sight. The next call came from Nelma, who had been monitoring the situation from her hotel. Valderrani, I just got a call from a lawyer representing Oswaldo. He's trying to claim that all the forged documents were my idea, that I somehow tricked him into signing them. Did you tell them about the recordings? Not yet. I wanted to check with you first. Over the past month, Nelma had been recording her conversations with Oswaldo, documenting his admissions of fraud and his plans to abandon me. The recordings were devastating, showing him in his own words, confessing to crimes that could send him to prison for years. Release them, I said. Let his lawyer hear exactly what kind of man they're defending. By 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Oswaldo was in custody. The charges were serious: fraud, forgery, conspiracy, and attempted unlawful commitment. The evidence was overwhelming, built from months of careful documentation by 3 women who had learned to work together instead of against each other. I watched from my living room window as the police car drove away, carrying the man who had been my husband for 43 years. I felt many things in that moment: relief, sadness, anger, vindication, but not regret. Never regret. Mary put her arm around me as we stood at the window. What happens now, Mammy? Now we rebuild, I said. We take back what he stole, and we start over. Are you scared? Terrified, I admitted. But I'm free. For the first time in decades, I'm completely free. That evening, after the lawyers had gone and the paperwork was filed, I sat alone in my kitchen with a cup of tea. The house felt different now, lighter somehow, as if a great weight had been lifted from its walls. My phone rang. It was Grasslin. Valderrani, I just wanted to say thank you for trusting me, for including me in this. I know it couldn't have been easy. We were all his victims, I said. It seemed right that we should all be part of his downfall. What will you do now? I don't know yet, but whatever it is, it will be my choice. That's something I haven't had in a very long time. After hanging up, I walked through my house, seeing it with new eyes. This was my home now, truly mine for the first time in decades. The bank accounts were frozen, but Dr. Santos had assured me that once the legal process was complete, I would recover everything that had been stolen from me. More importantly, I had recovered something that couldn't be measured in money: my dignity, my strength, my sense of self-worth. I had learned that I was capable of more than I had ever imagined, that even at 67, I could fight back against injustice and win. As I prepared for bed that night, I thought about the woman who had walked into the municipal market 6 months ago, innocent and trusting and completely unprepared for the truth that was about to destroy her world. That woman was gone, replaced by someone stronger, wiser, more resilient. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. There would be court hearings, media attention, family members who would question my choices. But tonight, I was at peace with what I had done. Justice, I had learned, was not something that happened to you. It was something you made happen, one careful step at a time. Chapter 6. The courthouse in Uberlandia buzzed with activity as I arrived for Oswaldo's first hearing 3 weeks later. The media had picked up the story. Woman exposes husband's decades of deception, and reporters crowded around the entrance, hoping for a statement. I walked past them with my head high, flanked by Dr. Santos and Marilyn, refusing to be intimidated by the cameras and shouted questions. Inside the courtroom, I saw Oswaldo for the first time since his arrest. He looked smaller, somehow, diminished by the orange jumpsuit and the handcuffs. His usual confident demeanor had been replaced by something that looked almost like bewilderment, as if he couldn't quite believe how completely his world had collapsed. His lawyer, a middle-aged man with an expensive suit and a nervous manner, was arguing for bail, claiming that Oswaldo was a pillar of the community who posed no flight risk. Dr. Santos stood to respond, her voice clear and steady as she outlined the evidence against him. Your Honor, the defendant has demonstrated a pattern of elaborate deception spanning decades. He has forged documents, stolen money, and attempted to have his wife falsely committed to a psychiatric facility. He has been planning to flee the country with stolen assets. This is not a man who can be trusted to appear for trial. The judge, a stern woman in her 50s, reviewed the evidence with meticulous care. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of absolute authority. Bail is denied. The defendant will remain in custody until trial. I felt a surge of vindication as Oswaldo's face crumpled. He looked across the courtroom at me, and for a moment, I saw something that might have been remorse. But then his expression hardened, and he turned away, refusing to meet my eyes. As we left the courthouse, Dr. Santos pulled me aside. Valdirene, I need to prepare you for what's coming. Oswaldo's lawyer is going to try to paint you as a vindictive wife who fabricated evidence. They'll claim you were complicit in the financial arrangements, that you knew about the affairs and approved of them. Let them try, I said. We have recordings, documents, witnesses. The truth speaks for itself. The truth is on our side. But trials can be unpredictable. Are you prepared for them to attack your character, your motives, your mental state? I thought about the woman I had been 6 months ago, the one who would have been devastated by such accusations, unprepared for anything. The weeks that followed were a blur of legal preparations and media attention. The story had captured the public imagination, a housewife's revenge against a cheating husband. And suddenly, I found myself the subject of television interviews and newspaper articles. Most of the coverage was sympathetic, portraying me as a wronged woman who had fought back against injustice. But there were also those who questioned my methods, who suggested that I should have simply divorced Oswaldo quietly, instead of orchestrating his public humiliation. You've become a symbol, Marilyn told me one evening as we watched the news coverage together. Women are calling you a hero. I'm not a hero, I said. I'm just someone who refused to be a victim. That's what makes you a hero. The trial began in September, on a crisp morning that carried the first hints of autumn. The courtroom was packed with spectators, journalists, and supporters. I had received hundreds of letters from women across Brazil, sharing their own stories of betrayal and thanking me for having the courage to fight back. Oswaldo's defense strategy became clear from the opening statements. His lawyer portrayed him as a man trapped in a loveless marriage, driven to seek companionship elsewhere by his wife's coldness and mental instability. They claimed that I had known about the relationships and had tacitly approved of them, that the financial arrangements were joint decisions made with my full knowledge. My client is guilty of infidelity, the lawyer argued, but not of fraud. The money in question was jointly earned and jointly spent. The properties were investments made with his wife's knowledge and consent. When it was Dr. Santos's turn to present our case, she methodically destroyed every aspect of their defense. She played the recordings of Oswaldo discussing his plans to have me committed, showed the forged documents bearing my signature, and presented testimony from bank employees who confirmed that I had never been present for any of the major financial transactions. The testimony from Graceline and Nelma was particularly damaging. Both women described in detail how Oswaldo had lied to them, promising divorce and marriage, while simultaneously planning to abandon all of us. Their stories revealed a pattern of manipulation and deception that went far beyond simple adultery. He told me that Valdirene was mentally ill, Graceline testified, her voice steady, despite the emotional weight of her words. He said she was in and out of hospitals, that she couldn't be trusted with financial decisions. He made me believe that I was helping him care for a sick woman. Nelma's testimony was equally devastating. He showed me fake divorce papers, told me they were from years ago. He said he had been waiting for the right time to tell his daughter about our relationship, that he was protecting her from the truth about her mother's condition. But the most powerful testimony came from Marilyn. My daughter took the stand on the third day of the trial, her voice shaking but determined as she described her father's behavior over the years. He made me complicit in his lies, she said, tears streaming down her face. He told me that if I exposed him, he would leave and my mother would be alone and destitute. He said he was protecting her, but he was really protecting himself. She went on to describe the incident with Viviane, her father's inappropriate behavior toward her friend. That's when I realized that this wasn't about love or protecting anyone. This was about a man who thought he could take whatever he wanted, without consequences. The prosecution's case was methodical and devastating. They presented evidence of systematic fraud, documented lies, and a pattern of behavior that showed Oswaldo to be a master manipulator who had exploited the trust of everyone around him. The defense tried to portray me as a calculated woman who had orchestrated an elaborate revenge scheme, but their arguments fell flat in the face of the evidence. The recordings of Oswaldo's conversations, the forged documents, the testimony of multiple witnesses, it all painted a picture of a man who had betrayed everyone who had ever trusted him. On the final day of testimony, I took the stand myself. Dr. Santos had prepared me thoroughly, but nothing could have prepared me for the emotional weight of telling my story in public, under oath, with Oswaldo sitting just a few feet away. I loved my husband for 43 years, I said, looking directly at the jury. I trusted him completely, supported him through everything, and believed in the life we were building together. I never suspected that he was living a double life, that he was stealing from me, that he was planning to have me committed to a psychiatric facility to cover up his crimes. The courtroom was silent as I described the months of discovery, the pain of learning about the affairs, the horror of finding the commitment papers. I didn't set out to destroy him, I continued. I set out to protect myself and to make sure he couldn't hurt anyone else the way he had hurt me. If that's revenge, then I'm guilty of it, but I call it justice. The closing arguments were passionate and persuasive on both sides, but the evidence was overwhelming. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours before returning with their verdict: guilty on all counts. Oswaldo's face went white as the judge read the sentence: 8 years in prison, full restitution of all stolen assets, and a permanent restraining order preventing him from contacting me or any of his former mistresses. As the bailiff led him away, he looked at me one last time. I saw no remorse in his eyes, only anger and disbelief that his carefully constructed world had come crashing down around him. Outside the courthouse, reporters surrounded me with questions about how I felt, what I planned to do next, whether I had any regrets. I have no regrets, I said firmly. I did what I had to do to protect myself and to seek justice. I hope my story helps other women understand that they don't have to be victims, that they can fight back and win. That evening, I sat in my kitchen, with Marilyn, Graceline, and Nelma, sharing a quiet meal together. We had become an unlikely family of sorts, bonded by our shared experience of betrayal and our collective triumph over the man who had deceived us all. What happens now? Graceline asked. Now we heal, I said. We rebuild our lives, and we moved forward. "Are you going to stay in Ubelanja?" Nelma asked. "This is my home," I said. "I'm not going to let him chase me away from the life I've built here." As my companions prepared to leave, each returning to their own process of healing and rebuilding, I felt a deep sense of completion. The legal battle was over, justice had been served, and I had emerged victorious. But more than that, I had discovered something about myself that I had never known existed. I was stronger than I had ever imagined, more capable of fighting for what was right than I had ever dreamed possible. The scared, trusting woman who had learned about her husband's betrayal in the municipal market was gone forever. In her place stood someone who had faced the worst betrayal imaginable and had emerged, not broken, but transformed. Chapter 7. The months following the trial brought a different kind of challenge. The media attention gradually faded, the reporters moved on to other stories, and I was left to rebuild my life in the quiet aftermath of justice. The house felt different now, truly mine, in a way it had never been before. Every room had been reclaimed, every memory recontextualized through the lens of truth. The financial recovery was more complex than anyone had anticipated. Dr. Santos worked tirelessly to untangle the web of fraudulent transactions, forged documents, and hidden assets that Oswaldo had created over the years. The house in Tibury was sold. The proceeds returned to me along with the money from several other properties I hadn't even known existed. The total comes to nearly 300,000 reais, Dr. Santos told me during one of our meetings. More than you ever imagined he had stolen. I sat in her office, looking at the financial statements that represented decades of systematic theft. How did I not see it? "He was very good at what he did," she said. "He used your trust against you, made you complicit in your own deception. But you found the strength to fight back, and that's what matters." The psychological recovery was harder than the financial one. I found myself questioning everything, every memory, every moment of happiness, every decision I had made over the past 43 years. Had any of it been real? Had Oswaldo ever loved me? Or had I been nothing more than a convenient cover for his double life? Dr. Santos recommended a therapist, Dr. Marina Souza, a compassionate woman who specialized in helping people recover from long-term emotional abuse. Our sessions were difficult but necessary, helping me to separate my identity from the lies I had been living. "Abuse doesn't always look like violence," Dr. Souza explained during one of our sessions. "What your husband did to you was a form of psychological abuse. He systematically undermined your reality, made you dependent on his version of truth. Recovery means learning to trust your own perceptions again." Slowly, I began to heal. I started sleeping better, eating regularly, even laughing at jokes for the first time in months. The constant anxiety that had plagued me during the investigation and trial began to fade, replaced by a cautious optimism about the future. In November, I received an unexpected visitor. It was Viviane, Marilene's friend, who had been harassed by Oswaldo at the birthday party. She was a sweet young woman with kind eyes and a gentle manner, and seeing her brought back all the anger I thought I had processed. "Donna Valdirene," she said, sitting in my living room with a cup of coffee. "I wanted to thank you for what you did, for having the courage to expose him." "You don't need to thank me," I said. "I'm just sorry he hurt you. What he did to me was nothing compared to what he did to you. But knowing that he can't hurt anyone else now, it helps me sleep at night. Have you been able to talk to anyone about what happened?" She nodded. "I've been seeing a counselor. She told me that what happened wasn't my fault, that I didn't do anything to encourage his behavior. It's taken time, but I'm starting to believe her." Her visit reminded me that the impact of Oswaldo's actions extended far beyond the women he had deceived. There were ripple effects, friends who had been made uncomfortable, family members who had been forced to keep secrets, young women who had been made to feel unsafe in their own social circles. That evening, I called Mariline to check on her. My daughter was still struggling with guilt over her years of silence, despite my repeated assurances that I didn't blame her. I keep thinking about all the times I could have said something, she told me. All the opportunities I had to end your suffering, and I chose to protect him instead. You were protecting what you thought was your family, I said. That's not wrong, even if it was misguided. How do you forgive me so easily? Because you're my daughter, and because when it mattered most, you chose to stand with me. That's what I remember. December brought the first Christmas since the trial, and I wasn't sure how to handle it. The holiday had always been important to our family, a time when we gathered to celebrate our bonds and our blessings. But everything was different now. Marilyn suggested we have a small celebration, just the two of us. We can start new traditions, she said. Create new memories. I liked the idea, but as the day approached, I found myself feeling unexpectedly emotional. This would be the first Christmas in 43 years that I would spend without Oswaldo, and despite everything he had done, there was a sadness to that reality. On Christmas Eve, I was preparing dinner when my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Graceline and Nelma standing on my doorstep, each carrying a covered dish. We thought you might like some company, Graceline said, smiling tentatively. We're all alone too, Nelma added, and we're all part of the same story now. I invited them in, and we spent the evening together, sharing food and stories and something. That felt like friendship. We talked about our plans for the future, our hopes and fears, our gradual process of healing. I've been thinking about starting a support group, Graceline said as we cleared the dishes. For women who have been through what we've been through. There are more of us than people realize. That's a wonderful idea, I said. I'd like to help, really. You'd be willing to talk to other women about your experience. If it helps them understand that they're not alone, that they can fight back and win, then yes. I'd be honored to help. As the evening wound down, and my guests prepared to leave, I felt a warmth I hadn't experienced in months. These women, who had once been my husband's mistresses, had become my allies, my friends, my chosen family. We had taken something ugly and painful and transformed it into something beautiful and healing. The new year brought new opportunities. The support group Graceline had suggested became a reality. Meeting every Wednesday evening in a community center downtown. Women came from all over the region, sharing stories of betrayal, deception, and recovery. Some were dealing with unfaithful husbands, others with financial abuse, still others with emotional manipulation. I found purpose in helping them, sharing my story and the lessons I had learned. I taught them about gathering evidence, about protecting their assets, about finding their strength when everything seemed hopeless. The most important thing, I would tell them, is to remember that you are not powerless. You may feel helpless, but you're not helpless. You have more strength than you know. One evening in February, a young woman named Carla approached me after a meeting. She was probably in her early 30s, with tired eyes and a nervous manner. Donna Valderrani, she said, I think my husband is doing the same things yours did, stealing money, lying about where he goes, making me feel like I'm crazy when I ask questions. How do I know for sure? I spent an hour with her, explaining the warning signs, the methods of investigation, the importance of documentation. A week later, she called to tell me she had found evidence of multiple affairs and significant financial fraud. What do I do now? She asked. You take back your power, I said. You decide what your life is going to look like from now on. 6 months later, Carla called to tell me that her husband had been arrested and that she was in the process of rebuilding her life. I couldn't have done it without you, she said. You showed me that it was possible to fight back and win. These conversations became the most meaningful part of my new life. I had turned my pain into purpose, my experience into expertise. I was helping other women avoid the years of deception I had endured, empowering them to take action before it was too late. By the summer, our support group had grown to include more than 40 women. We had partnered with legal aid organizations, domestic violence shelters, and financial advisors to provide comprehensive support to women escaping abusive situations. The transformation in my own life was remarkable. I had gone from victim to survivor to advocate, from someone who had been deceived to someone who was helping others avoid deception. I had found my voice, my strength, my purpose. But the most profound change was in my relationship with myself. I had learned to trust my instincts, to value my own judgment, to believe in my own worth. The woman who had once accepted lies as truth had become someone who demanded honesty, who refused to be gaslighted or manipulated. 1 year after the trial, I stood in front of a packed auditorium at the University of Uberlandia, delivering a lecture on financial fraud and domestic abuse. The audience was filled with students, professors, social workers, and other women who had found inspiration in my story. I spent 43 years believing that my worth was tied to my husband's approval, I said, looking out at the sea of faces. I thought that being a good wife meant being a silent wife, that questioning him would make me a bad person. I was wrong. The truth is that questioning, demanding honesty, protecting yourself, these aren't signs of a bad wife. They're signs of a strong woman. And every woman has the right to be strong. As I spoke, I thought about the woman I had been 2 years earlier, trusting, naive, completely unprepared for the truth that would shatter her world. That woman was gone, but she hadn't been destroyed. She had been transformed, reborn as someone stronger, wiser, more resilient. The applause was thunderous, but more meaningful were the individual conversations that followed. Women approached me with their own stories, their own fears, their own hopes for the future. Some were just beginning to suspect that something was wrong in their marriages. Others were deep in the process of gathering evidence and planning their escape. "You give us hope," one woman told me. "You show us that it's possible to start over, even when everything seems lost." "It's never too late to reclaim your life," I replied. "It's never too late to demand the truth." Chapter 8. 2 years after the trial, I received a letter that would bring my story full circle. It was from Oswaldo, written from his prison cell in Belo Horizonte. The envelope sat on my kitchen table for 3 days before I found the courage to open it. His handwriting was the same as always, neat, precise, controlled, but the words were different from anything he had ever written to me before. "Valderrani," the letter began, "I know I have no right to contact you, and I understand if you don't want to read this, but I needed to tell you that I'm sorry. Not because I want your forgiveness, but because you deserve to hear it." I sat down, heavily in my chair, my hands trembling as I continued reading. "I've had 2 years to think about what I did to you, to our family, to all the women I hurt. There are no excuses for my actions. I was selfish, cruel, and cowardly. I took advantage of your trust, your love, your loyalty. I stole from you, not just money, but years of your life, your sense of security, your ability to trust." The letter continued for several pages, detailing not just his crimes but the psychological manipulation he had used to maintain control over me and the other women in his life. He described how he had deliberately kept us isolated from each other, how he had used our love for him as a weapon against us, how he had planned to abandon us all once he had taken everything he could. "I want you to know that none of it was your fault," he wrote. "You were a perfect wife, a wonderful mother, a good person. I was the one who was broken, who couldn't appreciate what he had. You deserved so much better than what I gave you." The letter ended with a request that surprised me. "I know this may seem strange, but I'm proud of what you did. You could have remained silent, accepted your fate, let me get away with everything. Instead, you fought back. You found your strength, and you used it to protect yourself and other women. That takes courage I never had." I read the letter 3 times, each reading bringing different emotions. Anger at his presumption in contacting me, sadness for the years we had lost, but also unexpectedly, a sense of closure I hadn't realized I needed. That evening, I called Dr. Souza to discuss the letter and my reaction to it. "How do you feel about his apology?" she asked. "Conflicted," I admitted. "Part of me wants to believe it's genuine, that he really understands what he did. But another part of me wonders if this is just another manipulation, another way for him to try to control the narrative. What matters is not whether his apology is genuine, but whether it helps you in your healing process. Does it?" I thought about that question for a long time. I think it does. Not because I forgive him, but because it confirms that I was right. To fight back. Even he admits that now. The letter gave me a new perspective on my journey. I had spent so much time focused on Oswaldo's betrayal that I had sometimes lost sight of my own transformation. But his acknowledgement of my courage reminded me of how far I had come. That autumn, I was invited to speak at a national conference on domestic violence in São Paulo. The auditorium held more than 1,000 people, survivors, advocates, professionals, and politicians. As I stood at the podium, looking out at the sea of faces, I felt a profound sense of purpose. "My name is Valdirene," I began, "and I am a survivor." I told my story once again, but this time with a new emphasis on the transformation that had occurred within me. I spoke about the woman I had been trusting, passive, content to live in the shadows of her husband's life. And I spoke about the woman I had become, strong, independent, determined to use her experience to help others. "The most important thing I learned," I said, "is that it's never too late to reclaim your life." At 67, I thought my story was over. I thought I would spend my remaining years as a victim of circumstances beyond my control. Instead, I discovered that I had the power to write my own ending. The response was overwhelming. Women approached me throughout the conference, sharing their own stories of betrayal and recovery. Many had been following my case through the media, and they credited my example with giving them the courage to take action in their own lives. "You showed us that fighting back is possible," one woman told me. "That we don't have to accept abuse, that we can demand better." "You proved that it's never too late to start over," said another. "My grandmother is 83, and she left her abusive husband after hearing your story. She said if you could do it at 67, she could do it at 83. These conversations reminded me of the ripple effects of courage. My decision to fight back had inspired others to fight back, creating a chain reaction of empowerment that extended far beyond my own situation. During the conference, I met Dr. Ana Paula Costa, a researcher who had been studying the phenomenon of late-life domestic violence. She was particularly interested in women who found the courage to leave abusive relationships after decades of marriage. "Your case is fascinating," she told me over coffee. "You represent a new model of female empowerment, women who discover their strength later in life and use it to transform not just their own circumstances, but the circumstances of other women." "I never thought of myself as a model for anything," I said. "I was just trying to survive." "That's exactly what makes you so powerful. You weren't trying to be a hero or make a statement. You were simply refusing to be a victim. That authenticity is what resonates with people." Dr. Costa invited me to collaborate on a book about my experience, one that would combine my personal story with research on domestic violence and financial abuse. The idea intrigued me. Another way to use my experience to help others. "I want to make sure other women know that they're not alone," I told her. "That there are resources available, that fighting back is possible, that they can win." The book project consumed much of the following year. Working with Dr. Costa, I delved deeper into my own experience, analyzing the patterns of abuse and manipulation that had characterized my marriage. I also interviewed dozens of other women who had experienced similar situations, learning about the common tactics used by financial abusers and the strategies that had helped survivors escape. The research was both enlightening and disturbing. I learned that what had happened to me was not unique, that there were thousands of women across Brazil and around the world, who were living with similar deceptions. But I also learned that more and more women were finding the courage to fight back, inspired by stories like mine. The silence is breaking, Dr. Costa observed during one of our working sessions. Women are talking to each other, sharing information, building networks of support. Your case was a catalyst for a larger movement. The book, titled Never Too Late, A Woman's Guide to Reclaiming Her Life, was published the following spring. It became a bestseller, with readers particularly drawn to the practical advice sections that detailed how to gather evidence, protect assets, and build a support network. More importantly, the book led to speaking engagements across the country and beyond. I found myself traveling to conferences, universities, and community centers, sharing my story and the lessons I had learned. Each event brought new connections, new friendships, new opportunities to make a difference. On a warm evening in March, exactly 3 years after the trial, I sat in my garden with Marilyn, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. My daughter was thriving in her new career as a social worker, inspired by my example to dedicate her life to helping others. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked, fighting back instead of just walking away quietly. I considered the question carefully. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that I had to learn such painful lessons about the man I loved. But I don't regret fighting back. I don't regret demanding justice. I don't regret finding my voice. You've inspired so many people, Mammy. Women across the country know your name. That's not what I set out to do. I just wanted to protect myself and make sure he couldn't hurt anyone else. Maybe that's why it's so powerful. You weren't trying to be a hero. You were just trying to survive. As we sat in comfortable silence, I reflected on the journey that had brought me to this moment. 3 years ago, I had been a broken woman, shattered by betrayal, and seemingly powerless to change my circumstances. Today, I was a survivor, an advocate, a voice for women who had been silenced by fear and manipulation. The transformation had not been easy. There had been moments of despair, times when I wondered if fighting back was worth the pain and effort. But every woman who approached me with her own story of liberation, every letter from someone who had found the courage to leave an abusive situation, every phone call from a supporter who had been inspired by my example, these reminded me that my struggle had meaning beyond my own healing. The sun disappeared behind the horizon, and the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky. I thought about the future, about the work that remained to be done, about the women who were still trapped in situations like the one I had escaped. "There's still so much to do," I said to Marilyn. "And you'll do it," she replied. "You're not the same woman who went to the market that day and learned the truth. You're stronger now, more powerful. You found your purpose." She was right. I had found my purpose, my voice, my strength. The scared, trusting woman who had accepted lies as truth was gone, replaced by someone who demanded honesty, who refused to be silenced, who used her experience to empower others. I had learned that it is never too late to reclaim your life, never too late to demand justice, never too late to find your strength. At 69, I was not ending my story. I was beginning a new chapter, one filled with purpose, hope, and the determination to ensure that other women never have to endure what I endured. As I stood to go inside, I looked back at the garden, where I had sat so many evenings with Oswaldo, accepting his lies, living in his shadow. That woman was gone, but she had not been destroyed. She had been transformed, reborn as someone stronger, wiser, more resilient. The encounter that had begun in the municipal market 3 years ago had indeed been scheduled by fate, but it had not been scheduled to destroy me. It had been scheduled to awaken me, to reveal the strength I had carried within me all along, to show me that even at 67, it was not too late to fight back and win. I walked into my house with my head held high, ready for whatever challenges and opportunities tomorrow might bring. The scared, submissive woman who had once lived here was gone forever. In her place stood a survivor, a fighter, a woman who had learned that the most important encounter of her life was not with the stranger who revealed her husband's betrayal, but with the strength she had discovered within herself.